The email arrived at 11:47 p.m., a sterile, digital courier delivering a death sentence. It wasn't a shock. The whispered rumors had been slithering through the cubicles for weeks. But reading the official words, "Your position has been made redundant, effective, immediately, deepest gratitude for your contributions," felt like a physical blow to the chest. Layla Jones sat on the edge of her worn sofa, the blue light of her laptop bleaching the warmth from her dark skin. The silence of her small apartment pressed in, heavy and suffocating. 20 years. 20 years of being the first to arrive and the last to leave, of swallowing microaggressions with a tight smile, of proving herself twice as hard for half the recognition, all washed away by age. 5. Paragraph email. A single hot tear traced a path down her cheek, followed by another, until her shoulders shook with silent, gut-wrenching sobs. In the shadowed quiet, the dream of stability she had fought so desperately to build for her and her son, Elijah, crumbled to dust. The towering glass monolith of sterling dynamics was a temple of cold ambition, and its high priest was Julian Sterling. From his panoramic office on the 50th floor, the world below was a neatly organized game of Monopoly. People were assets, liabilities, or collateral. Emotions were an unsecured debt, a risk to the bottom line. He was reviewing the final list of layoffs, a necessary pruning, he told himself, to ensure a robust quarterly earnings report. His eyes scanned the names, a roster of numbers and departments, until one gave him a flicker of pause. Layla Jones, administrative support. He remembered her, not her name, but her presence. The woman with the calm demeanor who never seemed flustered, who somehow managed the chaotic schedules of a dozen executives with an almost preternatural efficiency. For a fraction of a second, a question of utility surfaced in his mind. Was she truly redundant? The thought was instantly dismissed by a harder, colder one. Sentimentality is the enemy of progress. He signed the digital document with a swift, sharp tap of his finger. The deed was done. Down in the bowels of the building, Layla moved through her final day in a fog of dignified agony. The pitying glances from colleagues felt like shards of glass. Each well, meaning "I'm so sorry," was a salt rub in a wound that was still fresh and raw. She packed her personal effects, a photo of a grinning Elijah, a lucky bamboo plant, a chipped mug that read "World's Best Mom," into a small cardboard box. Her heart was a lead weight. How would she pay rent? Elijah's asthma medication wasn't cheap. The future was a terrifying, dark chasm. Her exit interview was with a sympathetic HR rep, but the final severance paperwork required a sigh, not from the CEO himself. It was a corporate formality, a final humiliation. Directed to the executive suite, Layla rode the silent elevator up, her reflection in the polished doors a portrait of defeat. She was ushered into Julian's office, a cavernous space of steel, glass, and imposing modern art. He didn't look up from his monitor for a full minute, letting her stand before his desk like a supplicant. "The papers," he said finally, his voice devoid of warmth. He slid them across the vast expanse of polished ebony. "Sign where flagged. Your final check will be processed within 30 days. Layla's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. This was it, the official end. Just as the pen tip touched paper, the office door, which she'd failed to close completely, swung open. A small boy, no more than 7, stood there. He had Julian's sharp nose and serious brow, but his eyes were wide with curiosity, not cold calculation. A harried nanny hovered behind him. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. His session ended early and—" "It's fine, Martha. Oliver, wait in the lounge," Julian said, his irritation thinly veiled. But Oliver's eyes weren't on his father. They were fixed on Layla. He took a few steps into the room, staring at the photo of Elijah she had placed on top of her box. In the picture, Elijah was laughing, his head thrown back in pure, unadulterated joy, despite the medical bracelet visible on his wrist. Oliver pointed a small finger at the picture. He looked from the image to Layla's face, streaked with tears she'd tried desperately to wipe away. He saw the cardboard box, her slumped shoulders, the profound sadness she could no longer conceal. He looked directly at his father, his young voice clear and piercing in the sterile room. "Daddy," he asked, his tone one of pure, uncomprehending innocence, "why are you hurting the nice lady?" Julian Sterling froze. The words, so simple, so devoid of corporate jargon or financial justification, landed not on his ears, but directly on his conscience. They bypassed the fortress of his ego and struck a chord that had lain dormant for decades. He saw the scene not as a CEO, but through the uncorrupted lens of his child, a powerful man, a crying woman, a box of belongings. He saw the raw human cost of his signature. The word hurt echoed in the silence. It was a verb he never used. He terminated, he optimized, he streamlined. He didn't hurt. His gaze, for the first time that day, truly focused on Layla. He saw the elegant grace with which she held herself despite her obvious pain. He saw the depth of feeling in her eyes. He saw a person, not a line item. A memory long buried surfaced, his own mother, coming home from a job she hated, her spirit crushed by a boss who never saw her worth. The shame he'd felt as a boy, the powerlessness, the silence stretched. Oliver's question hung in the air, a moral verdict. Julian slowly stood up. The action was so unexpected that Layla took a step back, clutching her box. He walked around the desk, not toward his son, but toward her. He stopped a few feet away, his usual aura of impenetrable authority visibly fractured. "Ms. Jones," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Would you please sit down?" Layla sat, not out of deference, but out of sheer shock. She watched, bewildered, as the millionaire CEO, who had just coldly ended her livelihood, poured a glass of water from a crystal carafe with a slightly unsteady hand, and offered it to her. Julian started, then stopped. He looked at his son, who was still watching them with solemn eyes. "Oliver, wait with Martha. I'll be out shortly." The boy nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. Julian Sterling, a man who commanded boardrooms without notes, seemed at a loss for words. He leaned against his desk, facing her, his posture less rigid. "Your son?" he asked, nodding toward the photo. Layla's guard flew up. "Yes, Elijah, he's 10. Her tone was defensive, shielding her greatest treasure from this man's world of cuts and losses. "He looks like a wonderful boy," Julian said softly. The comment was so normal, so human, it disarmed her completely. Another tear escaped, and she wiped it away angrily. "What is this?" Layla asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why the sudden change? Did you just forget what it looks like when a person's life is being dismantled until your son pointed it out?" The directness of her question hit its mark. Julian flinched. "Yes," he admitted, the words seeming foreign on his tongue. "I think I did." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I review numbers, projections, efficiency reports. I make decisions based on data. I have to. This company, it's a machine, and I'm its chief engineer. I'm tasked with keeping it running, no matter what, even if it means grinding people up for fuel," Layla whispered. The starkness of her metaphor hung in the air. Julian looked out his window at the city he felt he owned. For the first time, the view didn't fill him with power, but with a profound emptiness. "My father built this company from nothing," he said, not looking at her. "His one commandment was never let them see you care. Caring is a weakness. I think I learned that lesson too well." He finally turned back to her. "My son just asked me a question my father never would have entertained. He asked why, and I didn't have an answer that made sense to a 7-year-old, which means it probably doesn't make sense at all." This wasn't an apology, it was a confession. It was the sound of a man's internal scaffolding cracking. Layla saw not a titan of industry, but a man trapped in a gilded cage of his own making, so disconnected from the human consequences of his actions that it took a child's innocence to reconnect. "Wires, my husband died 4 years ago," Layla said, the words coming out unbidden. She never shared this at work. Cancer. This job, it wasn't just a job. It was the rock. It was the health insurance that paid for Elijah's inhalers. It was the stability that let me tell my son, everything is going to be okay. And almost believe it myself, you didn't just make a position redundant, Mr. Sterling. You pulled the rock out from under us. Julian was silent. He looked at the severance papers on his desk, then back at her. A deep, unsettling shame washed over him. He had been so proud of the company's charitable foundation, its large, public donations. Yet, he had failed to see the profound need in his own office, to honor the loyalty and quiet strength of the woman right in front of him. "I was wrong," he said. The 3 words seemed to cost him a great effort. The data was wrong. A company's strength isn't just in its profit margins, it's in its people, its humanity. He took a deep breath. "The decision is reversed. Your job is not only safe, Ms. Jones, but I've been needing a new executive assistant. Someone with efficiency, yes, but more importantly with perspective. Someone who isn't afraid to ask why." Layla's mind reeled. The whiplash from despair to hope was dizzying, but a new strength, forged in the fire of the last hour, steadied her. This wasn't about charity. It was about justice. It was about value finally being seen. "I accept," she said, her voice firm, "but not on the old terms. I need a salary that reflects the value I bring. I need flexibility for my son's appointments, and I need to know that my voice, my perspective, will truly be heard." A slow, genuine smile touched Julian's lips, the first one that reached his eyes all day. "Those are the terms," he agreed. A year later, the atmosphere on the 50th floor was different. The art was still modern, but a vibrant painting from a local artist now hung opposite Julian's desk. Laughter was sometimes heard. Layla, from her desk just outside his office, managed his life with the same flawless efficiency. But now she also managed his perspective. She questioned Colsa's strategies, advocated for family-friendly policies, and initiated a mentorship program for young employees from underserved communities. One afternoon, Oliver was waiting for his father, coloring at a small table in Layla's office. Julian emerged, looking tired but content. He watched as Layla helped Oliver sound out a difficult word in his book, her touch gentle, her voice patient. He thought of the email he'd almost sent, the life he'd almost shattered, the man he'd almost remained. He had thought he was saving his company, but a child's 4 words had saved his soul. He had tried to fire a poor black woman, and in doing so, she had hired him for the most important job of all, rediscovering his own humanity. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he was no longer walking it alone. The healing, for both of them, had begun with a single, honest question and the courage to listen to its answer. Moral of the story: true strength is not found in the unyielding pursuit of power, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to listen to the smallest voices, and to recognize that our greatest failures can become the foundation for our most profound growth when met with humility and a willingness to change.